Well, once again, it looks like this election will come down to people who make up their minds at the last minute, and I wanted to speak to them tonight, and also to the people who have made up their mind of who they're going to support in this presidential election, but are trying to convince those last undecided voters, whoever they can make contact with, to join their cause, to vote for their candidate, with an argument that I haven't really heard anyone else make. Now, you've seen or heard both campaigns' arguments. You know what matters to you in this election. I'm not going to regurgitate stuff that you've already been bombarded with, especially if you live in a swing state. I can't imagine how many campaign ads you must have seen at this point, but I did want to offer perhaps a new take on this election, a different way to think about your vote. There's little doubt, well, really no serious doubt, I think, at this point, that the media has been by and large on President Obama's side throughout this campaign, especially and disgracefully covering for him, with very few exceptions, on this Libya scandal, and more recently, the egregious shortcomings in the federal government's response to Hurricane Sandy. I got sick, literally nauseous, watching the Sunday morning news programs this past weekend, seeing these media types fawning over what a great job President Obama did responding to Hurricane Sandy. And then later that day, I saw this. Obama is trumpeting his response to the hurricane out there on the campaign trail. Meanwhile, up north,
Nothing right is going on here. We got not even. There's old ladies in my building got nothing. Nothing. We gotta get some out. Okay. Take pictures.
great job, Mr. President. I'm sure those people really appreciate all you're doing for them. Now, to be fair, there is a limit to what the president can do, any president, when something like this happens. But that didn't seem to dawn on most people in the media during the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, which brings me to the focal point of this video. We're often left feeling dissatisfied with the job our government is doing, particularly the federal government, and some of the blame for that must rest with us, at least to the extent of the people we get to choose. We don't get to stock the entire federal government, but we do get to choose who we send to Washington, who we elect president, who we elect to Congress, things like that. So if we don't elect good people, then we can't really be surprised when the government does a less than good job. Now, not all of this is our fault, because sometimes, obviously, in elections, we don't have a good choice. There doesn't seem to be a valid option that we would be satisfied with. And as I said in a previous video, that's in no small part because there's a lot to discourage good people, people we would like to have in positions of power, from running for office, from seeking public office. And that's not too surprising, right? I mean, politics is a nasty business. It's a dirty business. And if you are a good person who is successful in life, then you'd be understandably reluctant to get involved in it. So it is something we should appreciate, right? When truly good people do seek public office. They do put themselves out there, and they are willing to subject themselves to this downright nasty business in order to serve their country. I'm not comparing it to military service, of course, but it is something that we have to think about, that it does matter who you send to Washington, and we don't have enough good people going into politics because of the very nature of the business. There's a lot to discourage them from doing that. So when we have a candidate running who is not only a good person but stands a good chance of winning, then that is something that we ought to be grateful for, right? And this year, in the presidential election, you not only have a good man running for president, but he's picked a good man as his running mate. Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan are two men of impeccable character. Say what you will about their skills as politicians, these guys are the real deal. And when you reflect back on this campaign, think about the message that your vote will send. I know that some of you may have already voted, I have, but consider this. What message would re-electing President Obama send, especially considering the alternative? What message would re-electing President Obama instead of electing Mitt Romney president send? That nice guys finish last? That there's no point in running an honorable campaign? That if you want to succeed in life, then don't bother taking the high road. That road is for losers. No, you don't want to end up like Romney and Ryan. You want to be a winner. Yeah, you want to eviscerate your opponent. But since he's such a great man, you can't rely on the truth. So you need to lie, smear him, kill him with character attacks. We voters are so stupid and gullible. If you repeat the lie often enough, then we'll believe it. For God's sakes, look at how many fools the Obama campaign and their surrogates managed to convince that Mitt Romney profited from shipping jobs overseas, or that he didn't care about anybody but the very wealthy, or that he's a flip-flopper who will say anything to get elected. There's not an ounce of truth to any of that, but we're so stupid. We could be convinced to look past this president's unquestionably abysmal record and return him to office. Yeah, he broke promise after promise after promise and lied to us repeatedly, and his administration deceived us about a terrorist attack on American soil that killed 4 Americans, including an ambassador. But what do you expect us to do? Hold him accountable? That's the message that voting for President Obama in this election will send, whether you intend it to or not. That bad deeds go unpunished. That a good man like Mitt Romney can't win an election by being true to who he is. Not anymore. No. The time for decency and honor in politics is gone. Is that the message you want to send to the next generation of leaders? That if you want to succeed, at least in national politics, if you want to get very far, then you have got to lie like a rug and be better at it than anybody else. I realize this may be a bit more dour message than you would have liked to have heard, but it is the truth. And I do hope voters will embrace Mitt Romney's more positive, uplifting message based on substance instead of style, as opposed to the guy who says voting is the best revenge. Not quite sure what President Obama has to be vengeful about, considering he seems to have gotten just about everything he wanted from the time he first emerged on the national stage, but that's his attitude, I guess. Vote for revenge. In conclusion, a victory for Mitt Romney would be a victory for America. A victory for President Obama would be a victory for calumny. As always, thank you for watching. Do check out my blog after the election. Right now, go out there and convince people to vote for Mitt Romney. But after the election, check out my blog. Also, follow me on Twitter at RightWingGenius. And finally, for the last time, before this pivotal moment in our country's history, and I think the history of the world, I say to you, don't mess with the right-wing genius.